All right, welcome. Today, we're diving into a story that starts with a really wild claim, the idea that ancient temples can actually heal modern diseases. But what's even more fascinating is how a group of researchers trying to get to the bottom of this stumbled upon a massive crisis that's threatening a nation's sacred heritage. So, let's just start right there with that big, provocative question. Can a temple really do something like that? Well, a group of independent researchers kept hearing these stories, these whispers about temples with incredible healing powers. And they thought, okay, we have to go check this out for ourselves. And that decision, well, it sent them on a journey they never could have expected. And their research turned up dozens of these places all across South India, each one believed to cure a very specific illness. But they didn't just collect stories. No. They went to these sites, they talked to the local people, and they say they even looked at medical reports, to see for themselves that these healings were real, checking the before and after from people's visits. But what began as this incredible journey to document stories of faith and healing, it pretty quickly took a dark turn. The team found out that trying to preserve this heritage wasn't just a challenge, it was downright dangerous. So, while they were investigating one temple's history in the state of Kerala, one of the lead researchers and his 5 friends, they found something that completely changed their entire mission. And this is a direct quote of what happened. They were just asking some local elders about the temple's history. That's it. And they were violently attacked and then detained. For them, this was more than just a scary incident. It was a huge wake-up call. They started to realize that what happened to them wasn't some isolated thing. Nope. It was a symptom of a much, much bigger crisis. These very temples, places that held so much cultural and spiritual meaning, were basically unprotected, misunderstood, and in many cases, just falling apart. And that incident, it really shone a light on the sheer scale of the problem. When you look at the data, you start to understand just how huge this temple ecosystem is and why so much of it is slipping through the cracks. I mean, just look at these numbers. They're staggering. In just these few southern states, you're talking about well over 1 million temples. And this isn't about a handful of famous pilgrimage sites. We're talking about a massive, sprawling network of heritage locations, a lot of them in really rural, remote areas. And the challenge of keeping an eye on them all becomes crystal clear when you zoom in on a state like Telangana. You've got nearly 100,000 temples. And get this, over 60% of them are privately run or totally unregulated by the state. That leaves them incredibly vulnerable to neglect and, well, people just taking over their land. So, whenever the researchers asked why these incredible temples were in such bad shape, the answer was always the same. There is no money. But as they started digging a little deeper, they discovered that that wasn't exactly the whole story. This number right here, 47. That's the total number of central government schemes that are actually available to support temples and their communities. We're talking about programs that offer everything from stipends for priests to money for restoration projects and even community meal programs. So the real problem wasn't a lack of money, it was a huge awareness gap. The researchers found that almost nobody, priests, villagers, nobody knew these programs even existed. And because of that, for more than a decade, all this money that was meant to help the temples just sat there, completely unclaimed, until it was eventually moved somewhere else. So, faced with this massive institutional failure and just widespread neglect, the researchers decided, you know what? We've got to build a solution from the ground up. And this led to a grassroots movement based on a really powerful and really simple idea. The concept is so straightforward. What if every single person who cared about this heritage just chipped in 1 rupee a day? I mean, it's a tiny amount for one person, but when you put it all together, it could generate enormous funds. It would empower communities to fix up their own temples without having to wait for outside help that might never come. This idea became the heart of a new organization called Abhyudaya, and their mission is really built on 3 pillars. First, you identify and document the temples that need help. Second, you glorify them by raising community funds for their revival. And third, and this is key, you protect them for the future by pushing for real, long-term policy changes. But beyond just raising money, the organization knew that for a truly lasting solution, they had to go after the root cause of the whole financial crisis, the massive loss of land and property owned by the temples. In this quote, this reveals a crazy paradox. On paper, the government's endowment ministry, the agency that's supposed to look after temple assets, is one of the wealthiest landowners in the entire country. But in reality, A huge chunk of its land has been illegally occupied for decades, generating absolutely zero revenue for the temples it's supposed to be supporting. So the proposal is to flip the script entirely, to shift from a system of just passive neglect to one of active protection. The core idea is to create a new government body, an endowment protection cell, whose only job is to reclaim and properly manage all of these lost lands. And the researchers laid out a whole detailed plan for the government. It includes creating a special force to go out and reclaim the land, and then regularizing the occupations by having people pay a temple tax that actually benefits the temples. They also suggested using central agencies for the really big, high-value cases, and setting up special courts to just speed up the whole legal mess. You know, this whole thing started with a simple question about healing. It then morphed into a mission to document a forgotten heritage. And then finally, it became a movement to heal the institutions themselves. So the final question, I guess, is whether this mix of community spirit and systemic change can actually be enough to protect this incredible legacy for generations to come.